parable of the lost sheep. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Then Jesus told them this parable. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." I tell you that in the same way there will be more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who do not need to repent. Amen.
The most daunting thing about standing up is having to move this. I assume I can just hold it by the plexiglass stuff. The fact that I can't read the second or third word in that thing is also scary. So there's a substitute teacher. She's standing in for somebody. And the class that she has is a primary school class, and they are notoriously difficult. To the teachers in the room, you know which ones I mean. So she's going to start her first lesson in a way that's going to put her on the pedestal, she's the boss, and the rest of the kids somewhere down there. Her name is Miss Shepherd. So she settles the class, she turns her back to them, and she begins to write on the board. As she gets to the second S of Miss, the door to the classroom bursts open, and a little boy stands sheepishly in the doorway. She's now faced with this conundrum. Does she give him a go? Sacrificing the kind of preparation that she's trying to set up to make sure that this class buys into what she's about to try and do with him. It's going through her mind, and the little boy looks at her, and before she can do anything, the little boy says to her, Miss, I'm sorry I'm late. I was throwing peanuts into the river." She's a little bit taken aback, but then motions to him to go and sit. He sits. She turns back to the board, and she continues to write. S, H, E, P. She hears behind her the door opens again. Another little boy is standing in the doorway, wide-eyed. Before she can say anything, he looks at her and says, "I'm sorry I'm late, miss. I was throwing peanuts into the river." More confused and somewhat bemused, she thinks to herself, just stick with a game plan. Don't engage. She motions this kid to a chair, turns back to the board, finishes Shepherd, underlines it, turns around. She needs to set the scene, and the door opens again a third time. And there is another little boy, wide-eyed. He looks at her and says, "I'm sorry I'm late, miss. She says, "Oh man, I know exactly what's been going on. You've been throwing peanuts into the river." He says, "No, miss. My name is Peanuts." Well, my name is Brett Garner, and my message tonight is titled Caution, Contains Allergens. You all know this story, but I hope that you'll look at it a little differently tonight. In the NIV, it's called the Parable of the Lost Sheep, because we all know that the headings in the NIV were divinely inspired. But I'm going to suggest tonight that it's not about the sheep at all. If you've been following the Preach Mania series, you will know that, we've been on a bit of a journey, and that the last few Sunday evening services have offered aspiring preachers an opportunity to stand up here and to speak. We've had Jesse, we've had Sam, we've had Griffey, Ashley, and Diego. All of them have done a fantastic job of sharing their personal insights about Jesus from this stage. And I hope I haven't left anyone out. They've all unpacked very familiar passages, but I've walked away from the series having had to rethink a couple of things. And I've been re-impressed by Jesus. Now, I'm not really an aspiring preacher, but I will confess to being somewhat perspiring tonight. There are a lot of familiar faces. Many of my small group friends are here. The preacher's wife, the preacher, the sub-preacher, the people at the back. This isn't my first sermon, but I don't want it to be my last. So there's a bit of pressure. Two of the preach maniacs spoke from Luke about the lost son and about the lost coin. And if you read this section in Luke, it actually is sort of three parables. I'd suggest there's maybe four, but there's three parables about lost things. And this parable tonight, Luke 15 verses 1 to 7, is often seen as the first of the three. So Sam dealt with the parable of the lost son, and Griffey shed some light on the lost coin. And because Sam started at the end and Griffey filled in the middle, I'm going to end with the beginning. So if you've been following, you'll know that tonight we have the last sermon by an aspiring preacher after all. Can we get that slide up? Now, the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of the law muttered, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." Jesus tells them a parable. Before you put the next heading up, I just want to point out that this welcomes thing has a lot to do with what we were exposed to this morning when somebody shared their experience of Alpha and this church. They explained that when they came to this church, they felt welcomed. But it wasn't a passive welcome. It was a go out and fetch them kind of welcome. It happens at the entrance to the church, right as you leave the street and come into the space. People are literally grabbing you and bringing you in. That's the kind of thing Jesus was doing with the sinners. He wasn't sitting back in his, one-bedroom apartment saying, when they're ready, they'll come to me. He was going out and fetching them. That was the point of the parable of the lost son. That father went and fetched his lost son. So let's have a look at what a parable is. Because you see, we're all quite used to the idea of parables, right? To us, a parable's endearing. It's a nice story. It's got a little message. It's pretty sweet. And I'm not surprised, because like you, I'm sure you went to Sunday school. Those of you who went to Sunday school, you grew up on a diet of parables. Parables is what they told us. And they told us a little bit about creation and the exile and crucifixion. And when you compare parables to things like the creepy crawlies and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, who are all vegetarian, by the way, and you think about chariots and chariot riders being drowned, and you think about what it really means to be crucified, then the stuff in the parables is far more acceptable and palatable to a child. So we know the parables, we're used to the parables. But I want to suggest to you, next slide, that the parables are probably more of a mystery to you than you realize. You see, very few of us know anything about raising sheep in the Middle East. We probably don't know our mustard plant from any other plant. And you've heard the story of the Good Samaritan, but I'm going to guess that you don't know the difference between a Samaritan and someone from Sumatra. Certainly, I would battle. There's a title, a review of a series of books called The Challenge of Jesus' Parables. It forms part of the McMaster New Testament Studies series. A guy called Dieter Reinsdorf writes in it. He's from Cape Town. And in it, he says that the parables as a genre is rather complex. You see, parables can be a parable, or a metaphor, or a simile, or an allegory, or a riddle. It can be all of those, or none of those, or something else. So, what is Jesus trying to get at? There's a disclaimer here. I'm not a recognized Bible scholar. I'm hardly even reputable. My small group will attest to that. But I will say this, I've read many parables many, many times, simply by virtue of the fact that I'm older than most of you, except maybe John. I do know this, every time I read a parable, there's something new that speaks to me. And it's why I think Jesus and those people who use parables use them. They are powerful, powerful tools. Despite the fact that they're not complicated, they are complex. If you dig a bit, the parable may give you a warning, it may give you a profound encouragement, and it may even give you a life-changing insight. So there's a warning there. Don't take the parables too lightly. There's another warning, and that brings me to the title of tonight's sermon, sort of in a way. I need to quickly address the issue of allergens. To those of you, or to those folks who know us from the 11 o'clock service, most people will know that I'm married to beautiful Tracy, not the other Tracy, this Tracy, and that I have 3 beautiful kids, Joshua and Hannah and Rebecca. What most people don't know is that of the 5 of us, one of us has a life-threatening allergy towards sesame seeds and sesame products. And one of the others, so that's 2 out of the 5, has a life-threatening allergy towards peanuts. When I say life-threatening, it's not just like we have a reaction and it's unpleasant. It's life-threatening. So for as long as Tracy and I have been together, that's 24 plus years, we've read the ingredients on packets, on product packages, as though someone's life depends on it. There is not a package that I don't pick up where I don't read the product list or the ingredients list. I had intended this evening to hold up a handful of these things. So this doesn't happen in my family, but this does. Can you do the next slide? Because if you look at the ingredients list of this thing, the lint bar, the allergens, you can't really see it, but there's cow's milk and soya in this thing, and some cocoa. And for the rest, there are no nuts. There's no peanuts. There's no sesame. I was going to hold up a couple of these. The irony is, and this wasn't even staged, is that this is what's in this one. And I had 2. I said to Tracy as I was leaving the house, the other one's gone. Because this is safe in my house. So when it is there, it gets consumed. Is anyone not allergic to peanuts? Josie? I read parables the way I read the ingredients lists of products. I'm looking very, very carefully for that thing that's in there that's meant to stir, or stir me at least. And I read them, parables, as though my life depends on them. I'm happy to bite into the sweet story, but I do know that there's going to be something in there that I need to digest, possibly quite carefully. Right, so we've got a parable, and now we have an audience. So will you stick up that thing? Let's quickly have a look at the role players in our story tonight. There's the scene. We've got Jesus, some tax collectors, some sinners, most of us, I guess. And those sinners could have included farmers, and it could have included shepherds, it could have included homemakers, and it could have included people like any of us. Except none of those people would have had cell phones. That's relevant because Sam told me so in his Preach Mania preach a number of weeks ago. Please listen to what Sam was saying about the lost son. By the way, if you do have a phone on you, please have a look at it. If it's not your phone, it's Griffey's. If you don't understand the context of that, go and listen to Griffey's sermon and give back his phone, please. Now, what's important is the passage doesn't say explicitly, there were shepherds, tax collectors, sinners, and shepherds. It doesn't say that. But I'm going to suggest, you can do the next slide, that shepherds were pretty common in those days. Here's a common shepherd. Oh, sorry, wrong. Other one. Thanks. There's a common shepherd. Shepherds were pretty common in those days. And the reality is pretty much every family in that time would have had a small herd of something. And somebody in the family, the youngest son, 9 times out of 10 or 100 times out of 100, would have been tasked with looking after that flock. And as you had more sons, the task would have fallen to the younger son, and then the younger son, and then the younger son. You know this from the Old Testament. That's David's story, right? If you had a biggish flock, you'd be quite proud of it, because a flock represented many things. If you had 100, you would have a big flock. And 100 sheep was a very good-sized flock. It would have brought the family food. It would have been worth money. There'd be some stability. And surely goodness and mercy would have followed you all the days of your life. And that's Psalm 23. So a flock is an important thing. I don't know if Jesus is being quite specific when he says 100. You see, 100 could be a symbolic term. It could be a sense that this is the perfect flock. Jesus is talking about the perfect flock. I don't know. But I do know this, if it was meant to be interpreted literally, 100 is a lot of sheep for one shepherd. So I'm going to take either of those interpretations or meanings, and I'm going to work with them. So let's get back to my point. My point was that the passage doesn't say that there were shepherds in the audience. But the term shepherd is used of religious leaders too. So there were shepherds in the audience. You see, the other people who were in the audience, can you flick back 3 slides or 2 slides just to the verse? The other people in the audience, the Pharisees and teachers of the law, they were the self-appointed shepherds of God's flock. There they were waiting for the Messiah, and these were the people looking after them in the wilderness. When Jesus looks at the grumbling Pharisees and teachers of the law, he sees shepherds. And when he looks at everyone else, he sees his flock. The Pharisees, I don't want to say too much about them, safe to say that they didn't like sinners. They certainly wouldn't have gone out to go and fetch sinners to come and dine with them. They would have gone out of their way to avoid sinners. So seeing Jesus with sinners was very jarring for them. Why would a fellow shepherd, a leader of the flock, want to, be in the same space as sinners? Sinners would make them unclean. Why would you want to be unclean? You want to be clean and perfect and close to God. So the Pharisees, sure, they didn't want to be around sinners. Okay, so we've got a parable, we've got an audience, we sort of know what's going on. Let's have a look at verses 4 to 6. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Doesn't he leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbors together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." You all know this. You've read this 100 times. I'm going to paraphrase Jesus' intro. And don't, Jono, tell me that I got it wrong. It's a paraphrase, mate. Which of you religious leaders and shepherds and common folk with 100 sheep goes out to look for one stray sheep, leaving the 99 behind? Slightly different from what he said, but I'm paraphrasing, right? So I was trying to make sense of this, so I went and I read a lot of stuff about sheep. And I have read in the past about sheep, and I've lived on a farm where we've kept sheep. I haven't kept them. The landlord did. The farm owner did. I just happened to live next to one of the sheep. According to a sheep-related fact sheet from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and yes, those things are available on the internet. It's incredible. In 2022, if you lost 2 sheep per 100 per annum, you were doing a good job. In 2022. So you see, if I had been in the audience and Jesus had said, "Who goes to look for one?" out of 100? I would have said, guys, keep your hands down. It's like a trick question. Jesus has got a point. Because if he said 3, put your hands up. But he said 1, keep them down. The other thing I know about sheep is a problem sheep is a problem sheep. You see, if you've got a sheep that runs away, you're going to go and find it. You're going to bring it back. And I'll tell you this much, next week, you'll go to church and there's a sermon preached about the sheep that got away again. And you'll be the focus of that sermon and you won't be happy. If I'd been in the audience, guys, keep your hands down. He's going somewhere with us. But, as John has pointed out, Jesus doesn't paraphrase, well, that's not the paraphrase of Jesus' story. This is what he says. He says, which of you with 100 sheep does not leave the 99 to go and look for one stray sheep? He's put it in an order. He almost wants someone to say, oh, me, that's me. But I'm going to suggest that the hands still stay down. For the same reasons that the other paraphrase made sense. Why would you run after one sheep? Now, if you've watched The Chosen, and it's worth watching, there is a dramatization of this parable in The Chosen. And The Chosen takes this idea of, me, I do that, where the shepherd of the 100 actually engages with Jesus. And there's the sense that I would happily, that's the shepherd, drop 99 for one. I don't think that's right. And I don't know as much as the theologians who advise the people of The Chosen, so I don't want anyone to take away the message that The Chosen is dodgy or anything. It's not. But I disagree with the way the Chosen has interpreted, because I think Jesus is trying to make a point. And I think the focus of Jesus' point is not the sheep. I guess it's a little bit like when you watch Shrek with your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old. I have a 3-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 16-year-old. I've done the Shrek journey repeatedly. It's a bit like when you watch Shrek, and yes, your kids are canning themselves, but you're the one who understands what the donkey is actually saying, and that's very adult humor. Just as well. So I think this parable is a little bit like that. The hands stay down because the shepherds that Jesus is talking to, they would never leave the 99 for one. They don't care about the one. They're the people who wrote the Ontario fact sheet about keeping sheep. Now some of you may say, but in those days there were lots of flocks of sheep. So maybe they put all the flocks together and then the shepherds got together and somebody was on call and somebody was taking a rest break and etc., etc. That may very well have happened, but I don't think it happened in this parable because Jesus is quite clear. He doesn't say, and then leaves the 99 with the other sheep in the other flock under the careful watch of another shepherd while he goes to go and find the lost sheep. He doesn't say that. Jesus is telling a parable, not a bad story. He wants us to know those 99 are all on their own. So which person in their right mind leaves 99 to go and find the one? In the verse we read here, it says, he leaves them in the open country. In the ESV, it uses the word wilderness, which I've bolded. The wilderness was the wilderness. Those sheep were left all on their own. It makes no sense. Guys, keep your hands down. Jesus has a point. So here we are, the hands are down, the religious leaders and any real shepherds and any common folk can't fault anyone. They're looking around the room, no one's hand is up, and that's actually okay. It makes perfect sense. Until Jesus hits that word wilderness, and until he says, in this story that I'm telling you, the shepherd puts his hand up and says, me, I do that. I want you to watch a short video. It's called The Unexpected Star of the Show. It's from Michael McIntyre's big show. If you don't know anything about Michael McIntyre, he's the guy who's quite funny right at the start. It's all over YouTube. You can go and watch it. It's quite old. It's not like a meme or anything. It's actually like real TV. It's not Christian, I will warn you. So not everything that you will see here is entirely appropriate for church. But we'll watch 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Tyrese, will you take it away?
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have some amazing stars on this stage tonight. But one of our performers isn't actually at the theatre yet. That's because right now they don't even know they're on the show. Each week on The Big Show, we're going to surprise a member of the public, and they will be performing on this very stage as our unexpected star of the show! Okay, so this week's unexpected star is called Natasha John. She's from Wales. She's a hairdresser at her mother's salon in Kenilworth. Natasha thinks she's coming to the theatre today to help her mum out with some hairstyling as part of a charity event that she thinks is going on at the theatre. But of course, that isn't the plan at all. Natasha has always dreamed of being in show business. Singing is her passion, and tonight we'll be making Natasha's dream come true. Natasha is on her way to the theatre right now. She's going to come, and we're going to call her up. We're going to attach a corridor onto here, which will then go into a fake dressing room, which is going to take up quite a lot of the stage. And then I'm going to go in it and put a wig on. And I'm going to sit in the chair. And then she's going to come into the room thinking it's a haircut. And then the whole front of the room is going to collapse. And you're going to go completely bananas, okay? So I've got my cape here. Here we go. That's good. So that looked great. That must look really good. I need to wig up. Okay. Shh. I'll see you in a minute. I'm going around. Michael, how are you?
She has no idea that this
It's amazing in here. Oh my God, I've just seen my hair. Close the door. Shh. Okay. All right, let's do it. Bring her up. Bring her up. Bring Natasha up.
Nearly done. I've got a room ready for you now. Are you happy just to finish it off? And if I grab you and just grab your things? Excellent. Looking lovely though. It's good job. Grab your things. We haven't got long. He's got to go on in a minute. So if you can be quick for me. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for this. It's this way. So who we've got now is our guest speaker. Okay. He just needs a bit of a style. Nothing major. Maybe a little bit of hairspray, something like that. Yeah. If you got it with you, that'd be lovely. Okay. So it's just in there. I'll go and sort your mum out if that's all right.
Yeah,
I'll
just check everyone's
got everything you need?
Because my mum's might have the hairspray. Yeah, my mum's got a hairspray. She was
Oh, okay. I'll go and grab it. Okay, thank you.
Oh, don't come in.
No.
Hello. Hello.
I didn't realise it was you. I'm under pressure now.
So in the story, to the listeners, the hearers, the people, I don't know, in the room, in the space where Jesus is speaking, we suddenly have an unexpected star of the show because nobody in that room or that space would have put their hand up. And yet this story is about a shepherd who puts his hand up. It helps now to have a little bit of context. You need to know a little bit about sheep. So I'm going to share with you some stuff I know personally and some stuff that I found on the internet. I'm going to just tell you, I found this stuff on something called The Savvy Farm Life. It's a website. And what is this website about? Well, you see, it's a site that tells people, like you and me, who don't know anything about keeping farm animals, how to keep farm animals. Because people like us, we are going to keep farm animals, right? It's weird what's out on the internet. Right, fact number 1. Sheep are prey and herd animals. Sheep are prey and herd animals. Their nature and instincts is to be in a flock for comfort and safety. Fact 2, you should not keep a sheep on its own. We lived next to a sheep on its own. Man, that thing was ballistic, and it was not well. Like physically, it was not well. Fact 3, sheep can experience stress and loneliness if separated from the flock or kept on their own. A stressed and lonely sheep does this funny thing, it lies down. A happy sheep also lies down, but when you get close to it, or you need to move it, or you need to call it, it'll jump up and come to you. A stressed and lonely sheep doesn't. It stays down. You can call it, you can get your dog, your common shepherd even, to go and bark at it, it's not going to move. The only way you get your stressed and lonely sheep that's lying down to get up again is you pick it up and you carry it. And that takes me on to fact number 4 about sheep, and this one I know firsthand. Sheep stink. If you're going to pick a sheep up and put it over your shoulders, so will you. So that means that if you're the kind of shepherd who, after a long day's work, wants to get home, have a little dinner, romance, you've been carrying a sheep, you're not getting any of that. Don't carry a sheep. Fact number 4, sheep stink. So there we go. We have the unexpected star of the show. The hands stay down because no one in their right mind is going to say, oh, I will leave 99 and go for the one. In fact, the religious leaders who are sitting there probably tuck their hands into their robes. No way my hand's going up. And here we have Jesus, who is literally chalk and cheese, telling us that the star of this show doesn't tuck his hands away. He puts his hands up. And you see, this shepherd is just like Jesus. It's like a mic drop moment for the audience. Someone in the audience looks around and says, hang on. We're stuck here in the wilderness. We're waiting for our Messiah. It's your job, religious leaders, to look after us. You said you would shepherd us. And yet your hands stay down. We're the lost sheep. And you literally will not even touch us because we are sinners and we stink. And yet here's a guy who went and fetched us and brought us in, and we're eating with him. And this story about this banquet and this feast, it's what we're doing right now. They know, the people who are listening to this parable, that their clean-smelling religious leaders actually smell like death. And it's this working-class carpenter who's the good shepherd. And everyone other than the religious leaders is actually the lost sheep found. So I started tonight with a joke about Miss Shepherd and peanuts. Sort of makes sense now, I'm sure. But the only reason that joke will work is that you don't know the context of who and what peanuts is. This parable, the one that Jesus tells, is quite similar, right? You see, you'll only understand and see the nuance of who the good shepherd is if you understand or you get duped by those bad shepherds in the mix. This is not a story or parable for me about a lost sheep. It's a parable about a good shepherd. A different shepherd. Not a shepherd like all the others. And Jesus needs his audience to understand that if they keep looking at the other shepherds, the bad shepherds, the religious leaders, they're never going to see the good shepherd. Because he's so radically different from them. And he also needs the bad shepherds to see how different he is. He is not a crony. He's not a colleague. He's the good shepherd. So I'm going to wrap up. This is a good story, right? It's a great parable. But it's actually a little bit more than that. You see, it's a call to each of us to take a really good look at our lives. Our daily grind is littered with allergens, bad shepherds, things and people we look at and look to for a solution, something to get us through the wilderness. But folks, there's only one good shepherd. Don't miss the wood for the trees. Our good shepherd pursues us. And it's not about you making yourself the focus of this parable. It's about making the good shepherd, Jesus, the focus of this parable. If you feel lost tonight, then know this: God pursues you. He's not waiting for you to come to him. He's chasing after you, and he won't stop until he gets you. If you're a sheep in the flock, then you can rejoice, because you're under the watchful care of the Good Shepherd. And to the Pharisees and the bad religious leaders and the uncaring shepherds, you've got to know this. I'm not saying any of you, but they've got to know this, that heaven is lint and no peanuts are allowed.